Hello, this is WoodenToby. For a while, I've wanted to discuss how I ballast my LEGO track, and it seems today is that day. Ballasting, in LEGO terms, is the process of adding parts to the standard track pieces to give them more detail. When I built my Knapford Junction layout, I came up with methods for ballasting LEGO's straight track, curves, and switches. I'm far from the first person to do this, and the methods developed years ago by the Pennsylvania LEGO Users Group, or PennLUG, are particularly prevalent online. I'll talk about how my techniques are similar to and different from theirs. In the video description, I've linked a Bricklink Studio digital model file of my ballasted track designs, as well as parts list for each. Here are all the parts you'll need to ballast one piece of LEGO straight track. LEGO makes its tracks in the dark bluish-gray color, so the plates should also be that color to match. For the tiles that will represent the railroad ties or sleepers, my personal preference is to use reddish-brown. To start, I assemble 6 separate sections of dark bluish-gray plates as shown. These attach to the underside of the straight track piece. The reddish-brown tiles attach on top, with a 1-stud gap between each row of sleepers. I use a long LEGO brick to straighten the 1x1 tiles on the outside edges, which is pretty satisfying. Occasionally, I'll add a 1x1 round plate or two for some extra detail. And that's all there is to it. A useful property of these ballasted straight tracks is the grooves on the underside allow them to stack nicely. Let's move on to curves. One gripe I have with the PennLUG method for ballasting curves, and I'm using the term gripe loosely here, as we're talking about a LEGO train hobby after all, is that it relies on pieces having some wiggle room in their connections, which gets into territory that LEGO set designers would probably view as illegal techniques. The method I've developed seeks to minimize that issue. Here are all the parts you'll need to ballast one curved track. I start by putting together 5 sections of plates for the center of the track. These attach to the curve's underside. Similarly, I assemble 5 more small sections for the outside of the curve. For the inner edge of the curve, I attach a 1x1 round plate to a 2x2 plate, then do that 3 more times. These attach along the inside of the curve, aligned so that the round plate is up against the edge of the rails and lines up with the gaps between the rails. One by 2 plates with rails fill in the remaining gaps. The inside of the curve is the one area where I'm still relying on wiggle room a little bit, although using the 1x1 round plates rather than 1x1 square plates makes for a more forgiving fit that significantly reduces any stress. Attaching the reddish-brown tiles is the last step. They should be placed to cover the gaps in the center and connect to the 1x1 round plates on the inside. A few notes on working the curves into a track layout. I like to keep the 1-stud gap between sleepers consistent, even when transitioning between track pieces. When you need a curve where the sleepers are shifted 1 stud over, so to speak, it's as simple as mirroring the design I just showed you. Next, let's backtrack to how I mentioned that the parts on the inside of the curve rely on some wiggle room to connect. In particular, the 2x2 plates are forced to rotate slightly outwards from what would be perfect alignment with the LEGO grid. wherever the inside of a curved section ends and a straight section begins, those 2x2 plates slightly press against the straight track's ballast parts. My preference is to replace the 2x2 plate with a 1x2 rounded plate to avoid this stress. Is it absolutely necessary? No, but as a math guy and a bit of a LEGO purist myself, it's what I like to do. To be clear, this is not an issue on the outside of the curve, nor with the 1x2 plates with rails on the inside. The curved tracks stack nicely like the straight tracks, but they are considerably more fragile. They look nice for a polished layout like my station, but I wouldn't recommend them for tracks that you set up and take down. For that purpose, my preference is to forego all the extra dark bluish-gray plate attachments and just have some brown tiles attached to the track piece itself. You can see that style in my more recent mock showcase videos. I know of some places online that sell 3D printed ballast plates that attach to the track and offer a sturdier solution, although I'm not really interested in them myself. The last type of track to cover today for ballasting is switches or points. Essentially, I treat the switches like a straight section and an S-curve that have been combined. However, switches have fewer connection points on the underside, so they benefit from additional parts that attach to a LEGO ground base below, which I'll cover in a bit. I won't narrate the build this time, but here are the pieces you'll need, and you can watch along to see the process. I'm showing how to ballast a right-hand switch. Ballasting a left-hand switch would be the same process, just mirrored, and the two wedge plates I'm highlighting on the screen would be replaced with their mirrored counterparts. Here's the final product, which has the bottom row of sleepers up against the bottom edge. If, however, you wanted the sleepers shifted one stud over, it will require a slightly modified build. Again, I'll mostly just let this play out on the screen. Like last time, these two wedge plates would be mirrored for an opposite direction switch. The build starts out the same as the last switch, so I'm just reusing footage here. Now we've hit where the build starts to become different. Despite my best efforts, a switch on its own still has some ugly gaps. as well as dark bluish gray parts on the top layer that's typically reserved for brown tiles. These problems can be resolved with a Lego ground layer below. The problematic parts on top can be replaced with connections underneath, and additional gray tiles attached to the ground can fill in the gaps, as seen on my layout. You can find one example of a ground layer designed for that purpose in the digital model file I mentioned that's linked in the description. Obviously, the switches contain curves, and I'm tracing the inside of those curves with my finger on the screen. Each ballasted switch will have one location where a 2x2 plate, either the standard square or a wedge with a clipped corner, is supporting a reddish-brown tile on the inside of a curve and also at the end of the switch track. If I attach a straight track, or the outside of a curve at this location, I replace the 2x2 plate with a 1x2 rounded plate to reduce stress, just like I did for the curves before. And that's everything I have to share on ballasting Lego track. Check out the links and resources in the video description, and feel free to comment any questions below. See you next time!